With Senator Freddie Cohen, who is Minister of Planning, but we're here today because it's Holocaust Memorial Day. But it's about remembering what happened, but it's not just remembering what happened and being appalled at what happened then, but it's about preventing it ever happening again. Are you happy with what's actually happening in Jersey?
Well, I'm happy with the process that we've gone through in the last few years of addressing the issues, particularly around the Second World War, and particularly around the suffering of those who had, until really the mid-1980s, been completely ignored. We've achieved people, at least for a few hours, thinking about the issues and about those who suffered without cause during the occupation. But in terms of changing the life of those who in Jersey are still below the radar, I'm not sure that much has been achieved. And remember that many of those people who suffered during the occupation were actually people who were below the radar. If you look at the Jews who suffered in the anti-Jewish orders, most of those people were not people who were recognizable as part of the pre-war Jewish community. They were people who had come to Jersey as domestic servants for menial tasks and suddenly appeared as Jews under the registration order, and they weren't known really to the community at large. And you know, that has an incredible resonance with the current circumstance in Jersey, where we have so many people in Jersey who are similarly below the radar.
Still under the radar, and unfortunately an increasing number of people who are in that situation. On specifics, we've had a Jersey housing law since 1949, but the housing shortage, if there is, can be described as a shortage, is greater now than it was in 1949. All the human rights standards, and I've got a booklet here that says human rights and housing needs, your right to be housed, these very basic rights which are established, Jersey doesn't seem to be getting to grips with it.
Well, whilst we maintain a structure that by its very nature encourages people who we've termed as below the radar to be effectively exploited, charged enormous rents for very substandard accommodation, we're not really going to improve. The process of improving is a very difficult problem, because what do? Do you enfranchise everyone and enable everyone to have equal housing rights? If you do, there are enormous consequences on the market. But the effect of leaving it as it is that large numbers of our population are unquestionably inadequately housed.
But the hard legislation to give it teeth is still not in place, and from the discussions that we were having with the Home Office, the Home Minister Ian Lamarcon, it's not likely to be on the actual out there actually having an effect for a very long time to come. Isn't it?
No, and it's sad. And look at what happened when anti-discrimination legislation was debated in the States. There were all sorts of arguments that were put forward to extrapolate extreme curiosity in the interpretation of the law that resulted in the proposals having to be put on hold for a while. There is a reluctance in Jersey to tackle discrimination properly, and I'm not sure why it is. It's not because the island has a propensity to discriminate. It's perhaps the other way, that many people in the island feel that we're not discriminatory, and because they feel we're not discriminatory, there's no necessity for the law. But I believe that we should have a robust anti-discrimination legislation structure that ensures that everybody is entitled to fair rights to property, fair rights to work, and fair rights to a reasonable life in the island. But we're a long way from it, and I think one of the key factors is that legislation like the anti-discrimination legislation, because it's not essential, because you can carry on administering the island without it, always gets knocked back when there are budgetary cuts, and we're under extreme budgetary controls at the moment.
Doesn't it surprise you that people who have experienced that aren't more fired up to want human rights safeguards? Isn't it strange that you'd have thought that process, in other words, the thinking behind Holocaust Memorial Day today, people thinking this must never happen again, wouldn't you think locally they'd be fired up to say this must never happen again, and we want the legislation in place?
I think some of them are. The problem is they don't represent a majority in the States.
When I go to like today's proceedings, and you're trying to grapple with the horrors of what's actually involved, what Holocaust actually mean, and it is so horrendous, and people have seen, even if they went through it, they've seen so many images. Personally, I can't understand how they aren't out there marching against it ever happening again. I don't know why they're not motivated. People aren't motivated.
Well, the uniqueness of the Jersey Holocaust Memorial Day is you have the juxtaposition of many, many millions of people who suffered terribly, and we know the circumstances. We've all seen the films and we've seen the photographs and we know what happened. But we've got these terribly personal stories of 22 individuals who came from Jersey, who we can all identify with, and who perished in those similar circumstances. And it's surprising that that doesn't translate into an understanding of how essential it is to ensure we have the appropriate regulatory and legislative framework. I'm sure it'll come. It's actually a very difficult thing because people are very reluctant to express their fears. They're very reluctant to express their circumstances because they feel very threatened by it.